So I'm excited to be able to share this topic with y'all. I have just about an hour, so we'll try our darndest to get through a majority of your questions. Understand the why behind Zoom. A lot of us, and so when I say Zoom, I really mean any video conferencing. So that could be Zoom, that can be Skype, that can be Microsoft Meet, that can be Microsoft Teams. So Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, so all of them are very similar. I think somebody was talking about Facebook groups where you can also do video as well. So all of them are very similar. And so it's the idea that we as human beings are social. We want to see each other's faces and have that person-to-person interaction, whether it's for a meeting, worship, Bible study, just hanging out for happy hours. I don't know who here has done a Zoom happy hour, but I certainly have, in order to get people together and to see them and catch up on their lives and to understand what's going on their part of the country. So again, so coming back to this is why we do this. And I think especially because we are all aching for person-to-person connection, this can be a way to not fully fill that need, but certainly scratch the surface of it. So again, so we're gonna go over Zoom, the basics. So you all are here, so that's like half the battle, I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes Zoom can be very particular. Everybody's been having some different settings. There have been several security updates and software updates, especially since the beginning of March. So again, being here is more than half the battle. So we're going to just walk through some of the basics. So then that way we all sort of have that same level playing ground, and then we can go from there. So I know that once we start digging in, we'll get questions. I'll be able to pepper them through, and then Shamika and I will also be able to navigate through many at the end as well. So what is Zoom? Zoom is a meeting platform. I've been using it for about 4 years in order to host meetings and host webinars. What's great about Zoom is you can find out way more information on zoom.us. When I watched a Zoom video, they call it zoom.us. I thought that was interesting. I still will say zoom.us. You don't need to download an app. It works on smartphones, tablets, computers, and via phone call as well. You have the huge advantage of having all of these recording options, video, audio, chat. There's everything in between all of the above. It's pretty amazing. You can host it on a cloud server or on your, you can have the recordings on a cloud setting or on your computer as well. So lots and lots of different options. The basic Zoom account is free, so that's a huge advantage. You can go in, type in a username, type in a password, and then you can get a free 40-minute meeting for up to 30 people. The pro account is you can go longer than 40 minutes, and you can have up to 100 participants. It is pretty cheap, $14.99 a month with like a little bit of tax added on there. If you're a nonprofit, you can go through TechSoup and get it for cheaper. And if you want for it to be even more cheaper, you can pay per annual fee and get a little bit of a discount in that way. You can also just pay month to month. If you recognize that you're gonna try this technology out and just go with 1 month and see what happens, you can just have that, you have that very low, low cost entry fee. The webinar add-in, which is what we're on, it starts at $40 a month for a 100-person webinar. It goes in tiers: 100, 300, 500. So very similar to pro accounts as well. You can add on a big meeting for 300 or 500 people. And again, all of those are an additional cost. So recognizing that, if you have a congregation of 80, then you're going to be good with just a pro account, or even with a free account if you're just hosting short meetings. And again, we are on a webinar, and so that means that we are restricting, and I'll go into this in a second, we are restricting what you all can see. So in that way, we're sort of saying this is what you're looking at, as opposed to a meeting, which has a little bit more flexibility. You can create one meeting link to be used over and over again, so that's a recurring meeting. The registration process is always recommended. I'll talk about safety in a few minutes. And recognizing that a lot of everything has shifted, and so know that we are still learning, and you all are learning how best to use this technology. So again, I've been using Zoom for about 4 years, so I sort of have hit my 10,000 hours tipping point, and so we will. So I've been here for a lot of it, so I can navigate it pretty well. So know that it takes some practice. I know that there have been some security issues with Zoom and connections with China and data mining. You can choose where you want your server storage to go through. So I went into my corporate account and I selected that I only wanted it within the US. Again, if you are just sending out Zoom links, they don't have to have a login or anything like that. And just as a quick note, if you have one Zoom account, they can host one meeting at a time. Just important to know. Alrighty. Friendly reminder, this software was not created for what we are trying to make it do. Zoom was created to be a meeting setting, like conferences, board meetings. It was not created to be the be all end all of live stream worship, of formation, of different types of audio and video coming in. It really is created for, well, I would argue a webinar setting like this one, or the straight up vestry meeting setting. It is not created in order to be bringing in all of these different multimedia, and that just keeps on keeping on. So Zoom bombing and security concerns. I'm going to address those up front. I know somebody had asked about how you can turn off the China servers. I will send you a link to do that. So then that way you can walk through it all by yourself. I'm not going to address that here in this space. So Zoom bombing, it has been written about in the New York Times, Washington Post. It is when people intentionally break into Zoom meetings and say derogatory slurs. They try to share their screen. Most of the time it can be anti-Semitic or Nazi party information that is being pushed. And so they do this, and I will tell you exactly how it happens. They do it via screen sharing. They do it via their voice coming over. They do it sharing inappropriate parts of their body via their camera. And then they also do it via their hold slide image. I'm going to be very straightforward. That is what it is. But what's great is that there have always been security features that can prevent that from happening. And you, as empowered ministry leaders, just need to learn how to do that. So then that way you can feel comfortable with it. And so then that way your congregation or your faith community or just your meetings can feel comfortable with that. So the holy trinity of security on Zoom is registration, password, and waiting room. So again, all of those features have always been on Zoom. Now the password and meeting room are required for some types of meetings. So registration is exactly what it sounds like. You force people to register in order for them to receive the Zoom meeting link, either via on their screen or on their email. So know that that is an option. Know that you can set that up with recurring registration. So then that way people can register once and then receive that same link for a bunch of different recurrences of the meeting. Password, it sounds exactly like what it is. You can create I would recommend a numeric password for your meetings. So that way people who are coming in will have that as a backup in case your super long link that has your password embedded does not work. For those who are For those who are calling in, a numeric password is easier than an alphanumeric password. And so that's why I would recommend keeping one password for all of the same, and it makes it a lot easier. I know some people have used the office phone number, they've used the street address, they've used the zip code. I think I've used the founding year of the seminary for one of them, or some number associated with whatever event you're hosting. So try and make it easy. Don't make it complicated. This is going to be my ongoing mantra of you can set it up. So then that way everything is the same for a lot of people. I talked about the registration, password, and waiting room as being sort of the holy trinity of security. Registration and password can also be added in for webinars. The waiting room is less of a thing, just because you're in this controlled environment rather than a meeting, which is a little bit freer. And then the fourth thing is a little bit of common sense. It's going to sound harsh when I say it that way, but don't post the meeting publicly and don't post the password publicly. So there are lots of ways around that. You can just send it out to your own church's email listserv. You can post about it within Facebook or in Instagram and say, message us for the meeting link. So then that way there's a little bit of a check and balance, a little bit of bouncer mentality towards it. A new thing that has appeared in the past few months is the in-meeting controls. These are amazing, let me tell you. So it used to be that you could only control the settings for the meetings in advance. So it would have to be on the website while you were setting it up, and there was just no sort of in-between piece while the meeting was happening. Now, it is here. So if you recognize that something else is going wrong, or if you want to sort of close the gates on your meeting, you can do that. And so that includes enabling or disabling the waiting room, or re-enabling it, where it's exactly what it sounds like. A waiting room is where somebody has sort of a hold screen, and then one of the hosts has to let them enter into the meeting. I think that this is really helpful. So in that way you sort of have a visual, like, oh, yep, that's the person that I want, and then let them enter. You can lock the meeting, which means that, again, sort of like locking the doors, nobody else can come in. You can turn off that person-to-person chat, which is helpful, especially when you're dealing with youth. So in that way they can't communicate, and you would not, as a host, would not know about it. And you can also disable screen sharing. So again, sort of you've hit a lot of the potential Zoom bombing just in that way. I would strongly recommend that with every meeting that you have more than one person as a host. So I'm going to say that again. Whatever meeting you have, I would recommend that there are multiple co-hosts. And so you can set that up within the meeting setting while the meeting is going on. And so I did it for this webinar right here. I made Shamika and Meryl co-hosts with me. So then that way, if something goes wrong, they have the ability to shut down anything that happens as well. And that's, again, definitely what I would recommend for you all. So I'm going to show you the in-meeting security. So it looks like a little sheriff's badge down at the bottom. You can see this when you are hosting the meeting or when you are a co-host of the meeting. And so you can see right here, you have these 4 options, and it looks really straightforward. Again, this is while the meeting is going on. You don't even need to set this up in advance. It is, again, pure gold. I know that this causes a lot of people anxiety. And I want to tell you, you have the tools to create a safe space online. And a lot of it just has to do with comfort and going in the meeting setting and playing around and just feeling free to click around. I promise you will not break Zoom. The worst thing that you could do is that you could end the meeting and then you just click on the link again and go back in and have all of your people do the same. That's probably the worst thing that could happen, especially as you're trying things out and being present and trying to figure out what this space looks like and how it can be shaped. Sorry.
Sarah, really quick, would you triage this? Would you say, like, the waiting room is the most important. I mean, like if you do that, that's going to get 90% of your stuff. I mean, if you have one, you know, like top line, or would it be all of it?
Mine has been, again, this is where it depends on context too. If it's a vestry meeting, you really just need a waiting room, because you can say like, oh, okay, I have 10, or council meeting, or just a board meeting. I have 10 people, I know what their names are. I can send out a list and I can let them in from the waiting room. Password is really good when you're having a little bit more of an open meeting, because you can send out one link, and then you also have that double check. So I would say if you're posting it publicly, registration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Trula asked a really great question. Can more than one host record?
I'm gonna have to dig in a little bit more to that question. So each of us as 3 co-hosts can say, I want to start recording. There is only one spot where the recording is stored, either on the cloud or on someone's computer. All right, and again, I can't speak highly enough of that in security meetings. It is completely, to me, an extra safety net that is super helpful and also super essential. All right, so I'm about to go over a webinar versus a meeting. Is everybody ready? Okay. Thanks for being enthusiastic, the 2 faces that I can see. All right, so we are currently in a webinar. So we are in a webinar. We have a little protected bubble within this webinar setting. So again, only panelists, faces, and audio and screen sharing can be shown. The chat is really active, the Q&A is really active, and so that is how you can foster community. Know that you can set it to automatically record. You can share videos and music and files as if anything else. So it really is, you as a host are being more selective about whose faces are being shown. I should have put this in here. My dad has brought up the Zoom church skit on SNL like no fewer than 10 times in the past month. He loves it. And so it is this very, very, very funny, I'll include this in the follow-up email so that way y'all can get a laugh. It is this very funny moment of where it is a Zoom church experience and a Zoom meeting, and there are lots of muting and unmuting issues. And so, you know, it's great. Again, I wish my dad was here so in that way he could attempt to explain what it is all about. But again, in a webinar, you won't have those problems, but you only see a few faces. So there's an advantage and a disadvantage of each of these choices. So the Zoom meeting, again, it is straight up like a meeting as if everybody is at a boardroom table or you are sitting in a classroom. All participants can screen share, but you as a host can also shut that down. Again, they can mute and unmute at will, or you as the host can shut that down. But no, that can be a varying experience for a lot of different people and different comfort levels. You can call in to either a webinar or to a meeting as well. These are not toll-free numbers, by the way. I've had that question quite a lot. They are not toll-free, but you can get local numbers towards your area-ish, depending on where you're located. Oh, and just as a quick note, again, meetings, you can do them for free for under 40 minutes. For a webinar, you do have to get that pro account, and then it is also an additional $40 for the 100-person webinar. And so this is what Meryl, Shamika, and I see over on this end, is that there's a little bit more within the format of the webinar versus what you all as participants are seeing. So you can see we can turn off our camera and mics the same way we can in a typical meeting. We can see the number of participants. So I can see that we have 67 people here. I have that option of screen sharing down here, and then I can click on the chat and various other pieces. And then over here, you can see the chat and the participants. and that my view as host, and I've set it up this way, is what you all see, and that is also what is being recorded and broadcast. Again, I have the ability to record, you all do not. And the one other thing that I want to point out is the broadcast function, and that is how we sort of opened up the floodgates to you all to be able to enter into the webinar. Shamika, Meryl, and I were in practice mode before. And so practice mode is helpful to know about. So then that way you have sort of that safe space to try it out and then like, oh, okay, you can now be let in. Again, so I always think of webinars as being a very traditional presentation. So this was me and my friend Chris when we were presenting last summer, when we could like go places and present. That was a thing where it is very much we as presenters sage on the stage, giving information, getting a little bit of feedback. So webinar participant view, as you all are experiencing, no mic or video capabilities unless the host grants them to you. You can't record. Chat box and Q&A are very active, and you have very little control functions over what you can see or not see. And again, so this is sort of a perspective about what it looks like as a webinar. So you can sort of do something along the side, but primarily the host is dictating what you can see. So for those who have high control needs, a webinar is definitely for you. So then if we flip over to a meeting, it is very similar to what Meryl, Shamika, and I see. You can do gallery view, you can do speaker view, the chat box is up and running. And again, depending on the settings, everybody can share their screen or not. And you still have designated hosts that have a little bit more control and oversight than other normal participants. And again, we've all seen sort of what a meeting looks like. This is my team, and so this is sort of all of us. So this is a lot more than sort of that streamlined view that is found within that webinar setting. Breakout groups.
Yes.
Yes. So this, I feel like Meryl, this is like my Meryl's like things. Like this is one of our things. So I have used breakout groups a lot because I'm in a doctoral program, and so we use breakout groups within our classes. And so it's great for small group conversations of saying like, here's your question, go talk about it, come back to the group and report back. Meryl has used it pretty successfully to split up Sunday schools. And so then that way all of the kids and families come together in one Zoom meeting, and then everybody pushes out into breakout groups. I love them. I think they're really helpful. I, as an introvert, sometimes get overwhelmed in that, big group 20-person meeting, but I do great in a 3-person small group. I think that like 3 or 4 people is the perfect small group on Zoom. I don't know about anybody else, if anybody else has opinions about it. And so that is my sort of favorite size of group within Zoom. Meryl, what else have you used breakout groups for?
During coffee hours, a lot of times people will, oh, okay, here we go.
Keep going.
Well, it's a bit much to go into a coffee hour with 80 people and people try to talk to each other. So just like you would in actuality or whatever, and if you were at the church, you'd be around a little table talking to somebody. So there's the opportunity to invite people, direct people into breakout rooms. And I believe, can they self-assign, or is that not an option? They can't self-assign?
No.
It sucks.
Yeah, we've also used it for passing of the peace, where we will break out into small groups and then do passing of the peace within our small group.
That's awesome.
Well, one other thing that I've seen people do, Sarah, is they'll have more than one person signed in with the same account credentials, so that more than one person can help sort people. So someone can say, hey, can you throw us into a breakout room or something?
Yeah, so the one thing about breakout rooms that are hard is that co-hosts don't have the power to sort, only the host.
Okay.
Which
so
is
they have to share it. They have to switch it.
Yeah, like it really is only one person has that God power. And I've recognized that as like being a huge stumbling block of that there's not that assistance that can come and like swoop in. You don't have that backup. So it's really disappointing. I'm gonna start complaining to Zoom about all of my various feature requests. All right, awesome. So again, breakout groups is exactly what it sounds like, into small groups from a larger group of 2+ people, or even one person per group. Unfortunately, you can't self-select, and so it is only the host that can do that. It can be random groupings or assigned. I always find that it's easiest to do random first and then reassign, but it is also possible to do assignments in advance. That can be really cumbersome because you have to know who is going to be there, what their email addresses are, and what email addresses they will use in order to log in. I love this. The host can visit various small groups to listen in on questions. Like when I worked in schools, I would, go to each of the little small clusters and just listen in, answer any questions, and then sort of shift over to the other one. I think that that's really helpful. And then that way you can sort of drop in and listen in for a second. And if anybody has any questions, you can then also be called in as the host. You can also broadcast messages and screen sharing. Oh, is there any other questions about breakout groups? I'll try and do questions.
Lynn just wanted to confirm if co-hosts can visit breakout groups as well. And Tracy wanted to know how to set them up.
There is a video. Meryl has a video, and then I have a follow-up video. And so I'm including that. You'll see the link to the entire playlist at the end. But breakout groups, it's one little feature within the host button, and then it's pretty great.
Great. And Jillian asks, could you speak to how phone-only folks interact with breakout groups?
Difficultly.
Mm-hmm.
It's really not ideal. It is very difficult in order to do it. If I had multiple people that were on the phone, I would probably keep them in the main session and let them chat. And so then that way there wasn't anxiety about getting them into the correct place or losing them along the way, because the main room is still open. And so I would probably just keep them there, maybe with 1 or 2 other people. And so then that way I would go and visit others, and sort of let them have a conversation group unto themselves. So
yes, and great questions are coming up here. So the next question is from Lewis about the suggested limit for coffee hour if you don't have the webinar version.
It's actually more dependent on the type of Zoom license that you have. And so if you have up to 100 people, that's what you have, is up to 100 people. And so it really just depends on what your leveling is. I think for coffee hour, you can have as many people as you want. But the important thing is to split them up into breakout groups. So then that way they can actually have that more intimate person-to-person connection that you're longing for in this time. So that's my 2 cents.
Wonderful. And then so Diane and Jillian also have other questions. I'm going to ask Jillian's question first. How do you keep the phone folks in the main room? And when you were talking about that before, as opposed to sending them to breakout groups, I think the answer to that is simply to not send them to a breakout group, and they'll remain where they are.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, because you'll be able to sort through and see that. And I'm sorry, I don't have a screenshot, but I will send you all a video about how to do that.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
I mean, because one of the things about breakout groups is you can invite someone, or you can open a room for them. Can you force them into it, or do they have to accept to go into that room?
And that's what makes me nervous.
Yeah.
So that's what makes me nervous, is that the phone really is a very different experience. It's more like being on a conference call. And so that to me is a huge barrier of entry and engagement already. So keeping them within that main group would make it a little bit easier. So, but I have heard of other people splitting them into a breakout group, of forcing them into a breakout group and then having another videoed person within it. So then that way there's a little bit more facilitation on that end.
Mm-hmm. And then Diane asks, can you keep people in the same breakout group if you're using the groups multiple times throughout the day?
Yes, you can. And so what's great is that if you decide to shake them all up and you have the groups ready to go, you can then just reopen those same groups within the next time. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
It's great, but it doesn't work if you have a recurring meeting of 4 times. Those groups don't stay in the same meeting over 4 weeks. So that's a bummer.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Great questions. And then Dee just wanted to confirm where the host finds the breakout group options. I think that'll be included in the video that you're sharing out. So all that information.
As with everything on Zoom, it is in the very powerful Zoom host toolbar, but it is something that you need to enable within your advanced settings. So again, Meryl has a video, I have a video. It's great.
Wonderful.
Alrighty. So screen sharing. I am currently screen sharing, so we'll start with that. So screen sharing is really helpful. So again, you're directing people's attention to one thing, but it's not just that it is PowerPoints or a Word document. I tried to do a comprehensive list. Let's see how good I did. It is videos, it's pictures, it's PDFs. It can just be music, as you all had during the break. It can be PowerPoints, it can be Word documents, it can be entire desktops. That can be scary, FYI, because it's not just that application window. It is literally your entire screen. And so that means that if you have a pop-up appear, or if you have an email notification, that is also on the screen. So warning, that is a thing that can happen. So this is the same thing. It is available in meetings and webinars. And again, much like many things in Zoom, it can be restricted to just the hosts or the co-hosts, or you can invite someone to share their screen if you have it all shut down. Again, this was part of the security settings that Zoom installed in the past few months, and I find it to be really helpful. It can be funny though if, of course, I've created the meeting and I have disabled screen sharing for all participants and I have forgotten that I have done that. And so inevitably there's a little bit of a flub of like, oh, I forgot to enable this for you. My apologies. So again, this is really helpful, especially if you're in a worship setting and you just want people to look at this one thing, or if you're in a highly sensitive topic meeting of allowing just that one person to be able to share, or the co-host to be able to share. Is again, what's great about Zoom is that meetings and webinars are very similar experiences, especially for the hosts. So if you feel comfortable in the meeting, you'll feel comfortable in the webinar, which means that you feel comfortable in the meeting. So this is when you click the green share button down at the bottom here, or at the bottom of your toolbar, or at the top of your toolbar, depending on where you like your toolbar as a host, you'll see the green share button. It looks like a little screen that has an up arrow. That means that you're ready to share. From there, you have all of these different options, and you can see it's an entire desktop. So all of my windows would be shared. I have 2 desktops set up, so you can see that. There's a whiteboard feature, which is pretty cool. You can play your phone or your iPad, and that will project out. And then from there, you can also share certain applications. Like I can just do Chrome, or I can just do Safari. And that is definitely what I would recommend, especially if you are just trying to narrow in on one document or on one picture. There is also, and I'm not sure if you've ever toggled back and forth. This is the basic. These are just sort of that normal thing that first appear. And then you have the advanced. And this is a portion of the screen, music or computer sound only. So that was how I did the music at the break. I think somebody had asked about how I did that. I did that through right here under my advanced settings of screen sharing. And then content from second camera. It is what it sounds like. I've never set up a second camera and added into Zoom, but I would be interested to see what that looks like if it's a different perspective. So let's say like if I have one here and then like one at an angle, and I could like toggle between, that would be a little bit weird. I would assume that it's probably meant for something like a document camera, which is I think that's what that icon is supposed to be. So like that old school document camera, like, is it Elmo? I think that was what they called it in library school. Is it an Elmo? So that way you can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. I'm glad that that's stored somewhere in my brain as opposed to some other important information. And the most important thing that I want you all to see, so that's why I took a screenshot and then highlighted it, is a lot of people have issues sharing computer sound. And this comes into play when you are trying to share a pre-recorded video, like if you're trying to share a video of Bishop Curry as part of your service. And what will happen is that if you don't select these two check marks right here of sharing computer sound and then optimize screen share for video clip, is that rather than hearing it inherent within the system, you will hear it out of my speakers on my computer leading up to the microphone. So it'll sound, unless you select these pieces, it will sound like it is at the bottom of the well and it is incredibly faint. So this is a super important setting that I wanted to make sure that I highlighted for y'all. And this is the same thing if you're using it within PowerPoint and have a video within PowerPoint, or if you're on an internet browser like on YouTube and you want to share YouTube sound. That's really important. Live streaming. So this is where, this is sort of like the middle in the Venn diagram. I know Paul is laughing at me over there, and Meryl too. Meryl mentioned this in his Facebook, and then I'm sure Paul will also mention it in the video and audio editing presentation. It is possible to live stream Zoom meeting or webinar on Facebook or YouTube. So I'm being very particular when I say it. I will be using the meeting example, but know that it works also for webinars as well. So if you've ever done a webinar via Lifelong Learning, one of my webinars or one of the Building Faith Christian Formation webinars, we try to stream onto Facebook as well. So in that way, it sort of gets that more like organic-y, reachy feel. So webinar or meeting onto Facebook or YouTube. If you're doing it inherent within the Zoom setting, you have to choose either Facebook or YouTube. If you want both of them at the same time, you're going to have to go with the third-party option. And so with Facebook, you can stream it to a page. So as Meryl talked about, so you can have it going to your church page, or you can have it going to a personal profile. So I've done it both ways, and it is very similar both of those ways. It needs to be, your Zoom account needs to be a pro or paid account. So again, not that free 40-minute level. It needs to be that one level up, that $15 a month level. And again, if you're doing a webinar, you're already at that level. So that's sort of an overlap. As my friends in Northern California reminded me when I was with them, you have to be careful of Safe Church guidelines when you do this, because you would broadcast different things. You would say different things within a closed church system, as most of us typically do on a Sunday, versus what is then broadcast out on the internet. So you wouldn't talk about, multiple details about, somebody's hernia surgery and how they're doing, and they're in room 302 at the general hospital down the street. Again, you wouldn't be giving out that sort of personal information. I know lots of people have been striving, have been attempting to cut back on last names being used, of just using first names, first initials, much like we would do at identifying children within Safe Church situations. And that's something to also consider as well. Not publishing addresses or saying them on broadcasts, and then also, not saying telephone numbers. Again, you have to think this, it looks like a closed system, but if you are also broadcasting it out onto Facebook or YouTube, it is no longer a closed system. And that just goes along with our increased awareness about security and safety as well.
If you share your computer sound and you still wanted to pick up sound from your mic, for example, singing with an accompaniment, that's possible, yes?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, because it's essentially two different feeds. There's the computer feed coming in and then the microphone feed coming in. I actually, yeah, Meryl.
I just wanted to add, this is where having earbuds comes in super duper handy. Matter of fact, I'd say if you're in a group where a lot of people are going to be talking and so forth, there's so many things that can go wrong especially if you have separate speakers from your microphone, your computer doesn't know what to cancel out and all that. So Diane, in addition to what you're talking about with the music coming through, if it's coming through your earphones, you're going to do a lot better with that.
And I laughingly don't use headphones, even though they're part of my best guidelines that I'll get to, because I'm in a relatively closed system here in my office, other than my dog barking at random noises. So there's a little bit less interaction and noise around me. Alrighty. So again, so this is available for the Pro account only. So I'm going to show you how to do the back admin setup. So this is really important. You need to go on the zoom.us website in order to do this. This is something that I've helped a few people with. There's way more options on the zoom.us website than there is on just the app by itself. So you go to Zoom, go to settings, advanced and meeting settings. And then the first thing that you're going to do is that you're going to toggle to allow live streaming of meetings. And then from there, you can select which ones you want. Meryl mentioned in his Facebook presentation that you can also do a custom live streaming service. And so this would be things like third party, or if you wanted to do and now I can't remember. Oh, I was thinking like, the stream key. You would grab the stream from that. There we go. It was not a 3-letter. I totally misled you on that. It was not a 3-letter thing. You would grab the stream key and then be able to go into a third-party app from there. And again, this is within the meeting or within a webinar. Again, this is where the similar settings work to your favor, where if you know one, then you are familiar with the other. That you just go into the more and you select live on Facebook or live on YouTube. And then what happens then? It's just getting into the exciting parts. What you have to be ready to go. This is where you need to know where your default browser is. That's always terrifying. You have to know which one will automatically appear. You have to be an admin on the Facebook page or the account that you want to log into. You have to know your YouTube account. And then you have to be ready with the title and the description. And then this is where the community element is really crucial. That if you are broadcasting a Q&A session or your worship service, you're trying to decide which piece you're paying attention to. Are you only really looking at the chat box on Zoom, or are you also looking at the comments on Facebook? So like, how are you engaging with those watchers over on Facebook versus the ones that are present on Zoom? Do you have a link to an order of service or a bulletin, or are you remembering to post up those same resources links on Facebook or on YouTube as they keep going? So again, this is where it takes multiple bodies and multiple computers helping out. I have done it. I've done hosting of webinars and also paying attention to comments on Facebook. It's a lot. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I always have to have a literal second screen set up, a literal second brain set up in order for me to be looking at Facebook while also then paying attention to the Zoom settings on my computer. So that is definitely where I would delegate that to someone else. What's great about this is that it's all inherent within the Zoom system. You don't have to figure out the stream key. It is just a click and go.
Mm-hmm.
But it is
awesome.
Pretty darn nerve-wracking the first time you try it out.
Yes.
Which is much like everything. I would definitely recommend that you try this out a few times to ensure that you feel comfortable with the process.
Yes, a little dry run, a little
Mm-hmm.
fun,
Yes.
example would be a great idea. I highly recommend that as well. And I just wanted to highlight Dave's question so that we have it for the recording. If you are a host on, if your host is on a pro account and then you're made a co-host, do you have the ability to use in-meeting controls?
Yes. Only the
Yes.
host or whoever is setting up the meeting needs to have an account, on a paid account. Yeah.
And do you have full access to all the in-meeting controls or just some of them?
All of them except for breakout groups.
Breakout groups. I knew
It
there was
doesn't
one
matter
else.
what kind of account the co-host has.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
I'm gonna fly through the last few like soft things that I have just to talk about. Somebody had mentioned how did Shamika well actually Paul and Shamika are both rocking the virtual background. How exactly does that happen? So this is one of those features where your computer does have to be smart enough in order to do this. I had to upgrade my computer recently, so now my computer is smart enough. So this is, and talk about horrible screenshots, Meryl. Of that this is under your video settings. And so you select a virtual background. You can choose a nice little like Northern Lights setting or San Francisco, or as Paul and Shamika did, they imported in a picture of their own. Or Shamika went to the good place. And that's, I'm like worried for you, Shamika, if you ended up in the good place. So this is just a fun little thing, that just a little levity. All right, Zoom best practices. I am gonna fly through this. So this is very similar to how one would set up any other in-person meeting, of being aware of what your body language is, of what your facial gestures are, of how frequently you need to turn your head to look at your second screen, which is what I end up doing. I've had to watch myself on video quite a lot, and I make a lot of horrible faces when I am not talking. I am aware of that now. And so it's just something when you're on camera, you continue to be on camera. And so to watch what you're doing and what your neutral face looks like versus your reaction face, it's just something to be aware of. Again, just as if we were sitting across the table from each other at a regular meeting. Much like at a regular meeting, set up your space well. Recognize sort of what's behind you or what's not behind you, what your lighting is. I myself have like a little like LED desk lamp, and I also have some natural light coming in. I love that combination. Try not to have a bright light behind you because then you'll be completely blacked out. Be aware of what your camera angle is, being aware of like if you're getting the ceiling or if you're looking up somebody's nose or looking at the top of their head. That's a weird experience to be a part of that. Using earbuds and headphones, as Meryl mentioned, that was great, Paul, thank you. As Meryl mentioned, that can be really helpful for reducing noise and noisy clutter around you. And again, just like you would at any other meeting or Zoom webinar, be aware of what you're doing, of making sure that you're setting aside the time in order to just do this one thing. One of my things is like, don't eat on screen. Meryl and I laugh that I should just like start like chomping down while I'm presenting, because this is of course lunchtime in Central Time. And again, just like be aware of what is happening and how you are comporting yourself. I know it's weird to be, at your house while also on a work meeting, but recognizing that you need to set aside the space and the time in order to be present with your people. This is something like just like facilitation. Introduce the place that you are meeting. Say, this is how we are interacting in this space together. This is what you'll see. This is what you won't see. Make sure that you're giving people the opportunity in order to try out Zoom or whatever other platform that you're using. Making sure that you're welcoming people, you're introducing the features, just as we did earlier today. Do a brief check-in and really say, model that process of how questions and answers are doing. If you have multiple hosts or bouncers or facilitators introduce that as part of the process. Talk about the meeting follow-up. If that means that you're sending out an email or if that means that you'll share a document, be aware of all of that. And creating group norms is a huge thing of being together online, of how are we living in this space, which is different from that online space, which is completely different from that in-person space. So how are we creating this setup together? Creating sacred space is a huge deal. And how we are entering into this space, how we are understanding our own expectations, and really saying we are setting apart this space together as being sacred. So how can that be different than just a typical check-in or a typical meeting? Group norms. I think I talked a lot about this already, so I'll include this as part of the follow-up, which is much anticipated. And so you'll have this ready to go in case you need some group norms. Again, friendly reminder. These are all friendly reminders, just as hitting points before we go on break. Distribute the power. You don't have to be the one person who is doing all of the things. Just as we would in any of our liturgy spaces, try to distribute different roles to different people, empower their ministry, and then maybe also train them in some tech skills. The app is really good for quick scheduling and launching meetings, but the zoom.us website is where the real meat is, where all of those details are. And make sure you test your video, lighting, sound. Get it so then that way it looks good, you feel comfortable with it, and you're not futzing with it as well. I have a lot of how-to videos. And so this is the quick link on how to access this entire playlist. This is, I believe, almost all of them, a majority of them here. I'm always looking for new topics. If you have one in particular, I'd be happy to take it on and to do a quick little video on it.
Dave recommended that since participants joining a meeting or service late don't see what's in the chat, the link to the bulletin or any other links could be sent out several times near the beginning of a service, and this sort of thing. And then wearing green, if you're using a background, is probably not the best style.
I don't have
so keep that in mind.
That's okay. I think like one of the interesting things about YouTube and Facebook is that they let you pin comments or pin certain messages, and so that is an advantage of doing the streaming on either one of those platforms, is that you can have that stuck there. You can have the bulletin or link to the order of service stuck there. So that's an advantage.
Indeed. Yeah.
Well, that was a whirlwind on Zoom.
I just to mention one quick thing is, I'm sure folks are putting this together in their head, but if you have a Zoom Pro account and you don't have the webinar add-on, but you're doing an open webinar and you just want people to be able to see it, just streaming it to Facebook or YouTube is actually a really good solution to that. You know, being able to share that link with as many people as you want to be able to come and see it. It's a bit of a workaround, you know, and if you have someone on Facebook or YouTube, they can be monitoring those questions that might come in and stuff like that.
Yeah,